5 Hidden Truths About Vlad the Impaler, the Real Dracula in the blood-stained chronicles of medieval Europe.
How one name rises above all others.
But before he became the immortal vampire of Gothic legend, he was a man of flesh and bone. A prince whose cruelty carved fear into the hearts of his enemies. Vlad III of Wallachia, known as Vlad the Impaler, was more than a ruthless ruler. He was the seed from which the myth of Dracula would one day grow. Tonight, we descend into the shadows of the 15th century, into a world where superstition ruled and death walked hand in hand with power. They think you know the story of capes, fangs, and castles haunted by the undead, but the truth is far darker. It's far more chilling than the novels and films dare to admit. Behind the mask of the vampire lies a man whose deeds were so monstrous, so soaked in blood, that even history itself trembles to whisper his name. In this episode, we will uncover 5 hidden truths about Vlad the Impaler that reveal the real story behind Dracula. These are not just tales of horror. They are secrets buried beneath centuries of fear and silence. You will hear of savage punishments designed to break the human spirit, of twisted rituals meant to summon dread, of political games played with blood and fire, and of a legacy so terrifying it birthed an immortal myth.
A wait for what follows
Will chill your soul and make you question where the line between man and monster truly lies. This is no fairy tale. This is the darkness of history itself, and it begins now. Truth number 1. The ruthless punishments of Vlad. The first hidden truth behind the legend of Dracula lies not in myth, but in the cold brutality of history. Vlad III was not merely a ruler, he was a master of terror, a man who wielded fear as his deadliest weapon. His enemies did not whisper his name, they spat it with trembling lips, for they knew what awaited those who crossed him. His most infamous method of punishment was impalement, a practice so grotesque it seared itself into the memory of all who beheld it. Captives, thieves, traitors, and invaders alike were hoisted upon sharpened stakes, their bodies pierced in such a way that death did not come quickly, but slowly, agonizingly, over hours or even days. The victims would twitch, convulse, and scream, their blood dripping into the earth while carrion birds circled above, waiting for the feast. Vlad's forests of impaled corpses stood as monuments of dread, grim warnings to any who dared defy him. But cruelty was not limited to impalement alone. Vlad devised punishments that seemed drawn from nightmares. Criminals had their limbs severed, adulterers were skinned alive, and liars had their tongues ripped from their mouths. Even those suspected of betrayal faced horrifying fates, often alongside their families, for Vlad believed mercy was weakness and fear was the strongest law. To his supporters, these punishments were not madness, but justice. In a land ravaged by war and corruption, Vlad imposed an order through sheer terror. Tales spread of peasants leaving gold coins on the roadside, untouched, because none dared steal under his rule. Order was achieved, but at a cost, the cost of unimaginable suffering. This ruthless devotion to punishment created the foundation of the Dracula myth. Bram Stoker did not invent the cruelty. He borrowed from it, weaving Vlad's real horrors into the fabric of his vampire. The sharpened stake that killed the guilty in Wallachia became the wooden stake that killed the vampire in legend, and thus history and horror entwined. This is the first truth. Vlad the Impaler was not feared because of some supernatural curse, but because his punishments were so merciless, so unspeakably cruel, that even death itself seemed a kinder fate. Truth number 2. Blood and rituals. The symbolism of fear, the second hidden truth behind. Vlad the Impaler lies in the symbolism of blood, not merely as a substance of life, but as a weapon of fear, ritual, and control. For Vlad, blood was more than the consequence of cruelty. It was the language through which he communicated power. Chroniclers of the 15th century described scenes where rivers of blood seemed to flow from the aftermath of his punishments, Corpses impaled upon stakes were not only executions, they were public rituals. Grotesque ceremonies meant to terrify both subjects and enemies alike. Blood became a stage prop in his theater of dominance, staining not only the soil of Wallachia, but also the memory of every soul who survived to tell the tale. Whispers spread that Vlad relished watching his victims suffer, even dining amid the carnage, raising a goblet as if to toast the death he had orchestrated. Whether fact or exaggeration, these rumors cemented his reputation as more than a tyrant. They painted him as a man whose rule bordered on the ritualistic, a monarch who made death itself part of his governance. In the eyes of the terrified, he was no longer fully human. He was something darker, a lord who feasted on pain, who consumed blood not with his lips but with his very soul. This macabre symbolism would echo through time, transforming Vlad into the Dracula of legend. Bram Stoker's vampire is defined by blood, drinking it not only to survive but to dominate, to corrupt, and to seduce. In truth, Vlad had already written this symbolism centuries earlier, not by fiction but by terror. He made blood the center of his mythology, and in doing so, he gave future generations the image of a creature both feared and eternal. The second truth, then, is this. Vlad's rituals of blood were not just acts of punishment, but performances of power. To see him rule was to witness fear given form, to understand that in Wallachia, life and blood were his to command. From this shadow, the vampire was born. Truth number 3. The political games of blood and fire. The third hidden truth reveals that Vlad the Impaler, reign of terror, was not madness without purpose. It was politics sharpened into a blade. In the 15th century, Wallachia was a fragile land caught between two relentless powers, the mighty Ottoman Empire pressing from the east, and the hungry kingdoms of Hungary and Transylvania pressing from the west. To survive, a prince needed more than courage. He needed fear itself as an ally. Vlad wielded terror not only to punish criminals, but as a weapon in the brutal game of power. His forests of impaled bodies were more than grisly spectacles. They were messages written in flesh and blood. When Ottoman armies advanced, they often found thousands of their comrades already rotting upon spikes, their lifeless eyes turned toward the horizon. This grotesque sight did what swords could not. It broke morale, curdled courage, and turned men into shadows of themselves before battle had even begun. Fear itself became Vlad's invisible army. Even diplomacy was soaked in menace. Ambassadors who refused to remove their turbans in his presence were nailed to their skulls with iron spikes. Their deaths transformed into living symbols of his defiance against the Ottomans. To foreign rulers, this was savagery. To Vlad, it was strategy. He could not match empires with gold or soldiers, but he could wield terror so effectively that even empires hesitated. Yet these games of blood and fire left scars upon his own land. While peasants praised his iron grip for keeping order, nobles and rivals whispered rebellion. To some, he was the savior who shielded Wallachia. To others, he was a monster whose cruelty endangered them all. In the political chessboard of medieval Europe, Vlad was both pawn and predator, using horror as his move, fire as his defense, and death as his proclamation of power. This is the third truth. Vlad's cruelty was not random, but calculated. Each impalement, each execution, each river of fire across Wallachia was part of a larger game, ruthless. Strategy to carve his place in a world where weakness meant annihilation. And in this game, blood was the currency and fear was the throne upon which he sat. Truth number 4. The myths and lies that shaped Dracula. The fourth hidden truth behind Dracula is that much of what we believe about him was not born from reality, but from myths and lies carefully spun across centuries. Vlad the Impaler was a ruler of flesh and blood, but the world remembered him as something more, something monstrous. And it was not only his cruelty that gave rise to the legend, but the stories whispered by his enemies. Chroniclers in Germany and Russia, hostile to Vlad, began to pen lurid accounts of his deeds. They described him dining among the dying, dipping bread in the blood of the impaled, even making pacts with the devil himself. These pamphlets, spread across Europe, painted Vlad not as a mortal prince, but as a fiend in human skin. Whether true or exaggerated, the tales spread faster than truth, and with each retelling, the man became more myth than monarch. Superstition fueled the fire. In Eastern Europe, fear of the Strigotha, undead spirits who rose from their graves to torment the living, was already strong. Vlad's name became entwined with these ghostly fears, his cruelty a perfect mirror for the nightmares of the people. To peasants he was not only a ruler, but an omen. A figure cursed to walk between life and death, to drink suffering as others drank wine. Centuries later, when Bram Stoker penned his novel, he would not need to invent much. The myths and lies had already sculpted Vlad into Dracula, the vampire who drinks blood, who rules from a cursed castle, who wields power in both fear and seduction. These were not purely Stoker's creations, but echoes of the stories written long before. Is the fourth truth. Dracula, as we know him today, is the child of myth as much as of history. Lies became legends. Legends became lore, and lore became the eternal shadow of a man who once ruled Wallachia. The real Vlad may have died centuries ago, but the Dracula shaped by lies will never die. He feeds on belief, fear, and the darkness in our imaginations. Truth number 5. The eternal legacy of Vlad Dracula. The fifth and final truth is that Vlad Dracula's legacy did not die with his body, it became eternal, woven into the very fabric of fear and fascination that endures to this day. While empires crumbled and kings were forgotten, the shadow of Vlad the Impaler grew darker, stretching far beyond Wallachia, far beyond the 15th century. His name alone became a weapon. For centuries, the word Dracula carried whispers of terror in Europe's taverns and marketplaces. Parents frightened their children into obedience with stories of the Impaler. Soldiers recounted tales of his cruelty to remind themselves that there existed monsters worse than war itself. Even after his death, Vlad's specter ruled through memory, through the dread his name inspired. But his legacy is more than fear. It is transformation. When Bram Stoker chose the name Dracula for his immortal count, he did not merely borrow history, he resurrected it. He gave Vlad new life, eternal life, in the pages of literature and on the screens of cinema. Dracula ceased to be just a man of cruelty. Today, castles in Romania draw pilgrims of horror, curious travelers who walk the same stones where Vlad once stood, believing that perhaps the night itself still remembers him. Vlad's body may rest in a forgotten grave, but his essence walks in every tale of vampires, every whisper of the supernatural, every flicker of candlelight in haunted halls. Hey, this is the fifth truth. Vlad Dracula achieved the immortality he sought. It's not through ritual, not through blood, but through story. His eternal legacy is that he became more than human. He became myth. And myths, unlike men, never die. We have journeyed together through the shadows of history, peeling back the veil that separates man from myth. What began with ruthless punishments became rituals of blood. Then political games carved in terror, followed by myths and lies twisted into legend, and finally, the eternal legacy of Vlad Dracula, the man who refused to die. These 5 truths reveal something chilling. Dracula is not simply a vampire born of Gothic fiction. He is the reflection of a man whose cruelty was so profound, so unforgettable, that the world transformed him into a monster that could never be forgotten. Fear made him immortal. Stories made him eternal. And with every retelling, every whisper in the dark, his shadow grows stronger. Think of this. How many kings and princes of the 15th century can you name? How many rulers of Wallachia do you remember? Yet Vlad Dracula endures not because of his crown, but because of the darkness he left behind. He was flesh and blood, but he became myth and nightmare. He sits upon a throne carved from fear, and centuries later he still rules the imagination of the world. So ask yourself, was Vlad Dracula truly more monstrous as a man or as the eternal creature he has become? Perhaps the answer lies not in history, but in the part of us that still shivers when night falls, when shadows move, and when whispers remind us that evil never truly dies. If you were captivated by these secrets of Dracula, do not let the journey end here. Like this video, share it with those who dare to look into the darkness, and subscribe to this channel for more haunted tales and forgotten truths. The corridors of history are never silent. Listen closely, and you may hear them whisper back.